as I thought of all the scriptures I was working with and all the circumstances we're dealing with, comes from the desk of the bishop or the archbishop of the Catholic Church in Papua New Guinea. And he has on his desk, Christ is our peace, from Ephesians 2:14. And he was working in the Western Highlands before he was Archbishop. He was Bishop of the Western Highlands. And there was a lot of conflict. A lot of conflict all over the place. And yet at the centre of his whole faith and ministry and the leadership of the life of the church, he recognised that Christ is our peace. And when you come to that text and you read it in Ephesians, you'll discover maybe it's not what you thought it means. In my evangelical spirit, I think of the way in which Christ has been my peace in my relationship with God. Knowing the grace and the generosity and the forgiveness that I've experienced, discovering that means that Christ is my peace. In other words, I'm forgiven, I'm enriched, I'm comfortable, if you like, in a sense, with my God. And he continues remarkably to speak with me and to lead me and to use me. So I find Christ is my peace in that personal spiritual sense. But when you come to Ephesians, you discover it's talking at a different level. Christ is our peace. It's actually talking about the community that has come together across incredibly divisive boundaries. Boundaries that divided, that put one group of people way down, to whom the one group would turn their back on them, would avoid them whatever way they could. And yet across these boundaries of hatred and division, of culture and of law, of regulation and behaviour, something else was happening. That the Spirit of God had moved in Pentecost and engaged with people across all the different cultures. And when they came together, they discovered that God's awareness was available to all these people, and not just the Jews that thought it was for them, but had taken it beyond. And the statement that Christ is our peace is a statement of a community that was once divided, that has now been drawn together. And as I come with you and say, I've been in, say, Bali, or in East Timor, which I'll refer to later in the day, or in Eastern Indonesia, or in many other places where there's been this deep hatred and hurt and major arson, burning down community after community, burning half the city down in Dili, for example, where the pain and the division and the terror reign and seem to overwhelm everybody and draw us into tears and fear and dread. Yet, when I've been and worked in those communities, I've watched the marvellous way in which people have been drawn into a whirlwind that comes from God, a whirlwind of reconciliation. And people are drawn into this reconciliation, which becomes not only a process that brings people together, but a process that completely changes our hearts, our thinking, and our relationships. A process of this whirlwind that draws us not only into transformation, but engenders a whole lot of new initiatives. And you start thinking completely differently. And you begin to imagine things that don't exist, that should exist. When I work with conflicts and talk to people on one side of the conflict over a period of time, and we were involved in one in Noosa years ago, on one side, the conflict, we got them dreaming and saying, well, what's your dream? And then you're talking to the other people also, and you're getting them to dream. And the remarkable thing is that ultimately when they bring their priorities down to the core of what they're wanting, what their heart desire is, when you come to it, it's marvellous, because I get very excited when I'm starting to bring two groups of people together, and I'm asking these people to come and have a meal with these people, and together, as they do, I'm going to ask these people to share their vision for the future. And these people are going to share their vision for the future. But the remarkable thing is that when you deal with conflict and division, these people want exactly the same as those people. They don't want to kill each other. They don't want to destroy each other. They want to be able to live in dynamic relationship with each other, appreciate each other, live together in a community of dynamics that's like God's whirlwind, that's transformational. And it's spine-tingling. You might think that the terror in Bali would have torn Bali apart and devastated forever. And one of my students actually wrote the book, The Lost Bali. A journalist, son of an imam. His name was Muhammad. We knew him by a different name. But Muhammad wrote that book. And the next time we were working together, we came to celebrate an anniversary of the Christian church in Bali, the Protestant Christian church in Bali, GKBB. And as we did, they were setting a 20-year mission plan. Because up until the terror, up until all that disaster in Bali, they were a frightened, shy church working in the corners of society, keeping out of harm's way as much as possible, because the dominance of another religion, happened to be Hinduism, was rather arrogant and very dominant. And when the terror came, you, minority, you other religions need to get off this island or we'll drive you off the island. But instead, the church said, no, we want to work with you. We want to go a gentle peace-building way. And John Woodley was with me. And we've heard those words together. Mr. Woodley's brother's here, Martin. And as you hear these words that come in this remarkable way forward, they began to work together, and we worked a strategy forward. And at the end of that first phase, when we got to there, even though there was all this resistance and opposition because they didn't believe that anything like this could possibly work, the miracle happened. And then people, in admitting the miracle, had to apologise because I was resistant, if anything, and so it goes on. And there we are, back in Bali, after all of this, and here the church launching its 20-year mission plan. Not just looking after orphans that other societies didn't want and nurturing them and growing them up. 80% of the pastors in the Bali church came out of orphanages. Because you can't proselytise. But discarded kids could be nurtured and growing up and become part of the leadership. And you saw Dr. Deborah there this morning. And her ministry has been absolutely remarkable, but she's just one of many who moved for our church from being in a corner, serving the least and the broken and the wounded, to a church that through the trauma became a church that said we have to be in mission. Because when they offered in a day it was, on the 22nd of October, 2004, 3 weeks after the second blast, the church said we want to go a gentle peace-building way. And the Muslims and the Catholics and the Buddhists and the Hindus concurred. And the dream that we could work together, that there'd never been before ever a heads of religious leaders conference coming together ever in the history of Bali. But on that day, it was. And 70-something of them were there. And as it all turns around, we head in a fresh and new direction. And this is what God has done by his Spirit, even in the very early days of the Christian church. Drawing people together, bringing them together and allowing them to hear this remarkable statement that God is a God of amazing grace. And they grasped it. So Jew and Gentile were reconciled. And they weren't just dealing with a legal regulation. As I said before, it went deeper and deeper and deeper into the whole fabric of society. And so it was in Bali. So it has been in many parts of the world. So it has been in our culture too. But it flows to gender, it flows to ethnicity, it flows to status, including the least, and it flows into conflict zones where reconciliation takes place. And what's more, it flows as a global movement. And Luke summarises it beautifully in Acts 1 and at the end of Luke 24, where he says that we are to be evidence of these four things. Crucifixion, from what I've just shared, it's not hard to be evidence of crucifixion in the world, is it? Of suffering and hurt and hostility and putting people down and critiquing and damaging people. But we're to also be evidence of resurrection. And we're to be evidence of forgiveness and reconciliation. Crucifixion, resurrection, forgiveness and reconciliation. And when he comes to it and he says to us as disciples this morning, as if Jesus might stand here among us, he just says to you, like those early disciples, I want you first of all, now that you know I'm alive and with you, I want you to go first of all to Jerusalem. No, not Jerusalem. Not Jerusalem. That's where they hated you. That's where their occupying army is focused. That's where you've been killed. That's where they are unjust. That's destruction. No, he says, I want you to go to Jerusalem. Into the difficult places. And sometimes the church has hesitated to go into difficult places. We hold back and say, well, it's just waste of money. But it ain't. Because as you take it, you discover that what happens in Jerusalem as you learn to come into those places, they begin to open up and they begin to say, well, okay, why are you here? That surprises me. I didn't expect you here. I thought you should run. No, I've come back because I want you to know that I want to be engaged in forgiving and reconciling and healing and dealing with that. And when you've done that, Jesus says, and then take it nationally. Go to all of Judea. And when you've done to Judea, then, because if you can deal with it in Jerusalem and you can take it to your own people, then you can go to your enemy, Samaria. And if you can take your process of forgiveness and reconciliation to your enemy, then nothing will stop you. And it'll continue all the way around the world. So I want to invite you this morning to realise that in all of our society, in all the fabric and issues of our society, in all the hostile places and damaged parts of the world, and all over the world, we have a commission. And so it's not just for here at Sunrise Beach. Whatever we do together is got this spread. We're caught up, as I said at the beginning, in this remarkable whirlwind of God's grace, the acts of reconciliation. So let me just ask you then, so what are our hesitations? What are the tough spots? And what are our limitations? Sometimes it's what's up here that's the problem. I remember standing as a bus arrived at the college where I was at one stage. A group of people from Edward E. Lodge in Sydney. It was a a homeless hostel run by the Uniting Church. And at Edward Eagle Lodge, they were taking a busload of them to a camp out on the Nepean River for the weekend to take these homeless people, and with all their addictions and all their hassles and all their problems, taking away to give them some dignity and live in a community together over a couple of days and a couple of nights. And to do that, they'd come to the college where I had international students, and they were going to pick up some of our students and take them with us, that they might be observers and facilitators, just being among these people. Well, they were coming to the college to share lunch with us. And then our students would get on their bus and away they'd go. And as the bus pulled up, the door opened and 3 guys got out of the bus, went to the bin of the bus, pulled the box out, and 2 boxes came out, and one grabbed a banana and peeled the skin off and threw the skin over straight down his mouth. And the other guy got 2 sandwiches, put 2 sandwiches in his mouth, chewed away for a while, and the crusts were dropped on the ground. And I thought, my guys, all these Pacific people that were there, had gone and picked all the frangipani flowers and put it all down the path to make it a welcome place for them to come. To tell them, this is a beautiful place, we want to love you and we want to be with you. And that was ignored. It was time to dig in and rip out the food. And I walked over to our guys who were standing there and I said to them, what are you thinking? And my from French Polynesia said, there's a lot of the least here, aren't there? You see, he saw it differently. I was embarrassed. He saw the possibility. There's a lot of least here. Matthew 25 says, whenever you see even the least of them, I want you to respond with grace and generosity. And wherever there's been violence and conflict, I want you to be evidence of forgiveness